would like to congratulate India on landing on the dark side of the moon. I would also like to now invite India to return the £2.3 billion foreign aid money that we sent them between 2016 and 2021. We're also set to give them £57 million next year, but I think the British taxpayer should keep hold of that, don't you? We should not be giving money to countries with a space programme. As a rule, if you can afford to fire a rocket at the dark side of the moon, you shouldn't be coming to us with your hand out. India...
So there you go. His name is Patrick Christys. Patrick seems to be a brainwashed victim of the sanitized version of British history. To start with, let me make this clear once again. Britain did not develop India. India developed Britain. How? Well, Patrick, it is common knowledge that your country is sitting on a massive $45 trillion worth of loot that it sucked out of India, and building the train infrastructure in India helped the British suck out the loot faster. I mean, if Indians seriously decided to take $45 trillion back from your country, the condition of your country would get so poor and desperate that, in Sunny Deol's words, Katora lekar ghumoge, bigbi naimilegi. So yes, Patrick, you should show some gratitude and remorse when you talk about India. And since the education system in your country has apparently failed to educate you properly, I am more than willing to help you. Learn that your country does not own the wealth that it is sitting on. A lot of that is just a result of the loot and money earned through slavery and the slave trade. Yes, you, the royal family, and your fellow countrymen are beneficiaries of that loot and dirty money, because all of you have inherited that shameful legacy of loot in the form of the loot-centric development that British citizens continue to use or benefit from. Now, Patrick, read this carefully. As mentioned here, India has transitioned to become a net donor of foreign aid. And back in 2017, it was revealed that India had been a net donor of foreign aid in the last 3 years. It provided more aid to foreign countries than it had received. Don't you forget that. Now, as far as the so-called British aid is concerned, in comparison to the $45 trillion that was looted from India, the so-called British aid is peanuts. And Patrick, within that aid, there seems to be your country's nefarious neo-colonial designs to exploit or benefit from the formerly colonized nations. Want to know how? Back in March 2022, in this video, I explained that the UK had already ended its traditional financial aid to India in 2015. And what India received afterwards is termed technical assistance and development capital investment. According to the UK's Department for International Development, the so-called aid to India also supports UK prosperity. Read this right here. They want to ensure that the UK benefits from new, expanded or more accessible markets. And read this. This so-called British aid that they brag about in the UK is even supposed to generate a return for Britain. Remember, when you want something in return, when you want to benefit, that's more like an investment, not a donation. The UK government department itself acknowledges that it is investing in India. As observed in this article in the British newspaper, The Guardian, the UK is using this money to create new markets and jobs. Patrick, this is investment, not charity. Do you get that? Point 3. And as far as investment is concerned, Indians invest in your country and generate employment in the UK too. According to this report published in 2021, there were more than 850 Indian companies operating in the UK, providing more than 100,000 jobs. Point 4. Patrick, learn how big India's GDP was before the British came and learn how it was destroyed by the British. Patrick, learn that your country's museum is filled with loot. It has been described as an active crime scene. And by the way, what do you think about the British Museum, whose trustees have been described as the world's largest receivers of stolen property? Are you proud of that? Human trafficking during the transatlantic slave trade. It was an English company that held the #1 position. Are you proud of that? The golden age of piracy. The greatest number of pirates originated from Britain. Again, the British #1 in the world. Are you proud of that? Patrick, I fail to understand how anyone can actually feel proud of flaunting their looted wealth. I mean, they even wear the loot on their heads. What kind of mentality is that? Doesn't this institutionalize or even glorify robbery or theft? How can any country do that so shamelessly? Patrick, how can anyone breathe so freely in a country that used looted money to grow itself? Patrick, does that not bother you? Point 5. Patrick, you asked, why are we paying to help poverty-stricken Indians when their own government won't bother, right? Now please, ask yourself, what pushed many Indians into poverty in the first place? Their looting by European colonial criminal states and their unwillingness to return that loot. Don't forget that. And second, how can anyone claim that the Indian government doesn't bother fighting poverty? Do you even know how huge India's social sector expenditure is? Read these figures. Do you see how huge that amount is? And of course, Indian taxpayers' money and the Indian government's efforts are showing results. Read this. According to the United Nations Development Programme, India saw a remarkable reduction in poverty, with 415 million people exiting poverty within a span of just 15 years. On the other hand, in the UK, many are falling into poverty every year. The UN data showed that 8.4 million people in the UK are too poor to eat. That is close to 13% of the country's population. The 2019 UN report showed that 1/5 of the UK's population live in poverty. And read this, 90,000 people die in poverty in the UK every year. Also, it has been observed that children in the UK are forced to eat toilet paper and scavenge trash bins at night for food. So why does the UK still have a space agency when it has so many hungry people and widespread poverty? Should Indians ask that question? And by the way, there are many temples or charities run by Indians in the UK. Have those Indians ever threatened to stop helping or feeding the poor, hungry or homeless just because the UK has a space agency? They can't, because they are doing seva, which roughly translated means selfless service. And that is the complete opposite of the UK's conditional aid that comes with ulterior motives. Point 6. Viewers, do you want to understand what the ulterior motives could be? Read this. See who was so keen to welcome the UK aid to India. An agency called Christian Aid, headquartered in London. They describe themselves as the International Development Agency for 41 sponsoring churches. And see what they have declared on their website. Everything we do is rooted in our Christian beliefs. And by the way, Loretta Minghella, who has worked as the chief executive of Christian Aid, was given an award too. Want to know the name of that award? OBE, or Officer of the Order of the British Empire. Yes, you heard that right. Officer of the Order of the British Empire. The victims of the British Empire may dislike that name, but see how proudly they talk about this award on their official government website. As mentioned here, the motto for OBE is for God and the Empire. I mean, in a country where awards or medals with these kinds of names are still given, a country where colonization is still glorified in schools and colleges, it's no surprise that a third of British people have said that they would like it if Britain still had an empire. What can I say here? This is their twisted mentality, probably beyond repair. Now, it doesn't mean that ordinary British citizens do not donate to charities or do not believe in giving aid. They do. For example, on numerous occasions, ordinary British citizens and even British children have donated their toys and other items. Not only that, thousands of schools in the UK have participated in this too. Millions of boxes containing toys and other gifts have been sent from Britain to other countries. They call it Operation Christmas Child. Want to know what happens with these boxes of toys and gifts? Well, such boxes with toys and gifts are packed with Christian literature and are then used by fundamentalist evangelical Christian missionaries to expose non-Christian children to Bible stories in the poorer parts of the world. Yes, they use toys to lure vulnerable children, give them Christian literature along with toys while hoping to convert them and their families to Christianity. Targeting the vulnerable and underaged, this seems to be a grave violation of human rights happening on an enormous scale. How can the international human rights organizations allow that to happen? Point 8. Many in the UK foolishly think that India is using the so-called British aid for its space program. They have no clue that besides feeding and helping the poor and hungry in the UK, Indians also sent a lot of aid to other countries. For example, take a look at this. Vaccine Metri, a humanitarian initiative undertaken by the Indian government. Many countries received vaccines for free. And see over here, India gives a lot of grants to many nations. And yes, of course, India's aid beneficiaries also include nations that were looted, invaded, bombed or colonized by the British. India helps them even when it never colonized them. Point 9. On the other hand, the British haven't even properly apologized for their colonial crimes in India. As seen here, British colonial policies resulted in 165 million deaths in India between 1880 and 1920. It's a massive figure, larger than the combined number of deaths from both world wars, including the Nazi Holocaust. Yes, the deaths of 165 million Indians in 40 years. Or, in other words, British colonial policies in India claimed more lives than all famines in the Soviet Union, Maoist China, and North Korea combined. No amount of money can ever heal the loss of those 165 million Bharatiya souls. Patrick, on the one hand, your country killed millions in India, and on the other hand, many Indians came to Europe during World War II to fight Nazism and fascism, which were products of Western civilization, and in that process, many from India sacrificed their lives to save the people of your country. Patrick, you will probably never ask your country to return the $45 trillion that your country looted from India, but at least learn how to be grateful to Indians who sacrificed their lives to save your country. Otherwise, instead of English, your mother tongue might be German. See you again